G'day, and welcome to Tartarian Truthers with your hosts, Casey and JoJo. Now, before we start this week's epic episode, we just want to take a moment to say a massive thank you to all of the amazing people who took advantage of our 15% off code last week and stocked up on some Tartarian Truther merch. We so appreciate your support and can't wait to see some of your pics repping our Tartarian Truther gear. Can't wait.
And we'd also like to thank the very lovely Kelly, the Bow Lady, for making a donation to us via our PayPal. You have a heart of gold, Kelly, and we appreciate you so much. And if you would like to help us out by making a donation, the link is in the description below. When you make a donation or buy some of our merch, you're helping us to be able to spend more time researching and putting together more content to share with you all. So thank you so much.
One more thing before we move on, though. Last week, Casey did our very first Tartarian tidbit on the elusive Queensport Aquarium. And we had this image sent to us from Lady Tartaria on Instagram. Thank you, friend. So, although it's not very clear, it does show us that this amazing place did exist and would have been a glorious sight back in its time. She was also able to source another photo too of the seal enclosure, and she was actually taken from a book, but unfortunately, due to copyright reasons, we are unable to share it on YouTube. But once again, more evidence that this magical sounding place did, in fact, exist.
Yeah, that is a very interesting photo. And I like how they've, you know, named it the ruins of Queensport Aquarium.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, it's odd because it's only 1917, so it's not that, you know, supposedly that long since. But
It
anyway,
closed down. I know, crazy, isn't it?
yeah.
Okay, so let's get started on our deep dive into Sydney Town Hall, shall we?
Yes, let's go. So, the Sydney Town Hall is one of Sydney's most recognised buildings, but it also has some pretty impressive neighbours, with the Queen Victoria Building and St Andrew's Cathedral flanking it on either side. Now, it has an interesting story in that it is said to have been built on the old Sydney burial ground, Sydney's first cemetery. So, apparently, the councilman at the time didn't have anywhere private to meet and they were dead set, excuse the pun, on the land that Sydney's first cemetery is said to have occupied, which they say opened in 1792.
Yeah, right. Because that's where I'd want to build a town hall, right? On top of a cemetery. Wasn't there any other land available?
I
I
know,
mean,
right?
oh, really?
It's weird. Anyway, they were so keen on this specific location that they even got Sydney's first royal visitor, Prince Alfred, Duke of Edinburgh, to lay a foundation stone on the 4th of April in 1868, even though negotiations were still underway for the transfer of the site and there weren't even any plans for the building drawn up yet.
Eventually, the aldermen got their way, and within a matter of months, the site on which the town hall would be erected was exhumed and cleared, and the municipal council announced a public competition for the building designs.
Always with the competitions. What is with that, huh? They
Mm.
always seem to have a competition for the grandest buildings back in the day. It's so odd.
Yeah, it is. And it's also a little bit sus that Sydney's first ever European cemetery was dug up and destroyed less than 50 years after it was said to have been first established. I mean, listen to this quote from French explorer Francois Perron. An object of curiosity by several striking monuments that have been erected in it, and the execution of which is much better than could reasonably have been expected from the state of the arts in so young a colony.
I mean, it sounds like it was a pretty flash place, considering Sydney at the time was still a fledgling colony. So, why demolish the cemetery and build a whopping big building there instead? Unless that's just a cover story to make us believe that that's when and where the town hall was built.
Hmm.
I mean, was Perron perhaps really referring to Rookwood Cemetery in this observation?
Because apparently during the early days of the colony, no official records were kept of deaths, nor was land set aside for burying the dead until 1792. So there's literally no record kept of deaths and burials in the early days. And remember that huge fire that destroyed the Garden Palace back in 1882? Well, it destroyed any records that we had up until that time. Quite convenient, huh? And we have no colonial records of deaths or births for that matter, no censuses either. So, how do we really know who lived here and what was actually going on in Sydney before 1882?
Yeah, and to be totally honest, how do we even know for certain that the town hall was even built on a cemetery? I mean, there are no records to prove it. It's just the story we've been told. There are no photographs, nothing really to prove that there was a cemetery there, except for these dodgy looking images, which are supposedly people doing an archaeological dig under town hall. But we could just be told this narrative, Jojo, couldn't we?
Mm,
To stop us asking questions about the impossibility of Sydney Town Hall, and it can't be proven or disproven because there are no records to refer to about our earliest days of the colony.
yeah, once again, pretty sus. Okay, we did digress a little bit there and for good cause, but let's get back to business.
Okay, let's put this into a bit of context first, shall we? All across the world, town halls share many common features, from Europe to Asia and Africa to the Americas, which is what makes it kind of weird, right? The official historical narrative says that they originated in Anglo Saxon times as places where citizens came to pay their taxes, and later as the medieval meeting places for the members of guilds who upheld the standards for trading in cities and towns.
Really, though, I mean, does that explain why they are all built in the same imposing style all over our realm? And it's odd that in the history books, town halls are also described as connected to large outdoor spaces with adjoining administrative offices. I mean, look at Sydney Town Hall's neighbours. Could they perhaps have all been part of one larger complex at some point in time?
Yeah, it's very odd that these government buildings all over the world appear to be built as architectural landmarks in the same style and having the same features.
But let's take a closer look at Sydney's. J.H. Wilson won the competition for this one. Now, this was lucky because he was a very skilled man by the looks of things, known as an architect, an interior architect, a landscape architect, as well as an industrial and product designer and an artist. He arrived from England in 1856, but he sadly died at the age of 49 in 1872 before the town hall was even close to being completed, if we're going by the official narrative, that is.
Before we go any further, let's put this into perspective, Jojo. So, the town hall was built between 1869 and 1890, roughly. And at the same time, we've got them smashing up the Garden Palace in just 8 months in 1879. And then we've got the Queen Victoria building just next door. And that was being built between 1893 and 1898. Then we've got St Andrew's Cathedral, also next to the town hall, which was finished in 1868, I think. And then just down the road, we've also got what used to be called the Gresham Hotel, but is now the Hong Kong Economic and Trade Office. Yep, that's right. Smack bang in the middle of Sydney CBD. And then we've got the GPO in all its glory just around the corner, too. So, a massive period of growth. And that's just mentioning a couple of the big ones. But there are hundreds and hundreds more huge old world structures said to have been built in Sydney in the same time period. So, where'd all the skilled tradesmen and labourers come from?
Yeah, I guess they shipped in huge squadrons of men from overseas to do the work, Casey, because our population at that time was still minuscule, and it's highly unlikely that they would be capable of constructing so many huge projects at the same time.
Absolutely. It's a totally unbelievable story when you start to break it down, especially when you look a little closer at the town hall itself. Such a grand building, built for a fledgling colony in a country that wasn't even recognized as a nation yet. I mean, that didn't happen until 1901. So, where was all the money coming from for this majestic building?
Yes, so majestic. And we're told that it was built in two stages. The first stage opening in 1878 and the second in 1890. But let's take a look at some of its features.
So, this is Centennial Hall, or as it's also known, the Temple of Democracy. Now, this was, until the completion of the Sydney Opera House in 1973, Sydney's largest indoor venue. For almost a century, local and international performers, including musicians, conductors, singers, and dancers, all performed in Centennial Hall.
I'm not sure why the councilmen of the day thought they needed this huge space when they wanted a private place for meetings. I mean, it's said to have been the largest municipal hall in the world in 1889.
Yeah, it seems excessive, huh? I mean, why did they also need this huge organ in there too?
Well, according to the official narrative, Casey, Sydney's aldermen were determined to ensure Sydney had not only the best, but the grandest money could buy. So much so that they supposedly had the biggest organ in the world at the time installed too. Listen to how it's described by Wiki. When it was installed in 1890, the Sydney Town Hall grand organ was the largest in the world and remained the largest concert organ built in the 19th century. It remains the world's largest organ without any electric action components and is of international significance. It contains one of only two full length 64-foot organ stops in the world.
Whoa, these guys must have been loaded, huh? I mean, to get that built and transported all the way to Sydney from England.
Without a doubt, Casey, especially when we pair that with its surrounds. The Australian red cedar galleries and huge marble columns. It is often referred to as the most impressive example of English Renaissance styled interior in Australia.
Wow, that's incredible. But we mustn't forget the vestibule, JoJo, regarded as one of the most significant Victorian interiors in Australia, which, according to the history books, is all thanks to the skills and craftsmanship of Sydney's early colonial artisans. It was completed in 1880, just in time, they say, for the concluding celebrations of Sydney's International Exhibition in the Garden Palace.
Phew, what a time to be alive. I
I
mean, amazing, huh?
Yes, I know, right? So they say that the plasterwork borrows influence from Moorish and neoclassical architecture, fashionable in the mid 19th century. It features a complex polychrome palette of over 40 different colors, and 22-carat gilt highlights embellish the hundreds of swags, scrolls, geometric ornament, and fine plaster tracery, which decorate the walls and the ceiling.
Fancy schmancy.
But wait, we can't forget about the dome.
Oh,
So listen to this. Are you ready?
mm-hmm.
High above the double story space is a large elliptical dome decorated with 12 LED light panels, each individually hand painted with an allegorical figure representing the four elements of air, earth, fire, and water, and 8 female figures as virtues representing justice, temperance, industry, prudence, peace, plenty, trust, and liberty.
Wow. And then, from the center of the dome, which I think is absolutely spectacular,
Mhm.
a large crystal chandelier is suspended, which is illuminated by over 160 light globes. Now, this, they say, was specially imported from Europe as the finishing touch of the vestibule.
Wow, stunning.
Mm.
But what really piqued my attention, Jojo, was this from Wiki. So it states that the roof structures of the first stage are timber with trusses spanning the two large spaces. The nature of the structure supporting the vestibule dome and the adjacent rooms is not known.
Say what? So they're openly admitting that they don't know how the vestibule dome and adjacent rooms are being held up. What the heck? You've got to be kidding me, right?
I know, it's so weird, isn't it? It just blows my mind. I'm speechless. To just
Go
admit
ahead.
it openly too, like, "Yeah, well, that's there, but we don't know how."
We don't know how they got that up there. Oh, pretty interesting. Wow. Anyway, and now for the vault. Once a fireproof strong room or safe, it's now been completely refurbished and is hired out for meetings, but only if you meet their strict criteria. So the local PNC, for example, wouldn't be meeting there. But what makes this room so interesting is the article that we found in the Sydney Morning Herald.
A few clippings of hair, apparently taken from Napoleon Bonaparte on his deathbed, have been found in Sydney's Town Hall after the 130-year-old building cleaned out its vaults. The tiny swatch of light brown hairs had for years been stored in the archives of the imposing sandstone building, along with a letter, but nobody knows when, why, or how they were received. Margaret Betteridge, who has curated an exhibition for the curios uncovered in the building, said on Thursday she could not be sure the hair belonged to the deposed French emperor, but that the accompanying letter made for a good case. In it, a Scotsman named Ned Todd explains that he was given the hair by a woman whose brother, a Major William Crockett, had been present at Napoleon's death. If I mistake not, she said that her brother, Major Crockett, had himself cut the lock from the head of the illustrious dead, he wrote. Betteridge said it was known that Napoleon's hair was cut after his death and that Crockett appeared in a painting depicting the death scene. More mysterious is how the hair ended up in Sydney, more than 13,000 kilometres from where he died in St Helena in 1821 at the age of 51. We don't know how it got here, Betteridge told AFP, but it doesn't look like it is the sort of thing that someone would fake. Betteridge said 2 years of renovations to improve the town hall had uncovered scores of strange objects stored in underground vaults. I had one vault that was just crammed full of the weirdest and wackiest things, a really interesting assortment of gifts given to the city, and bits of coffins and bits of Napoleon's hair, she said. The most valuable piece is likely a large Sèvres vase, a gift from France following Sydney's hosting of an international exhibition in 1879. The French government was so impressed with the way Sydney had handled the exhibition and managed the whole thing that, as a token of their gratitude, they presented the mayor and the people of Sydney with this spectacular porcelain vase, Betteridge said.
Wow. How interesting. I'm sure somebody out there knows how that got to Sydney, right? Okay, so let's look at the council chambers themselves, shall we? They featured a tiered public gallery, Doric columns, and entablatures between arch headed windows and Australian red cedar joinery. Another stunning space.
Yeah, but according to the official story, some of these rooms went out of fashion really quickly. So quickly, in fact, JoJo, that when they started the second stage, just 12 years later, after the first stage was released, the first floor chambers, including the council chambers, the finance room, the alderman's refreshment room, the reception room, the town clerk's and the Lord Mayor's offices, and the first floor corridor and the grand staircase. So, pretty much everything were all redecorated with what they say was aesthetic movement style decorative schemes.
Hmm. I wonder how much that would have cost to redecorate so quickly. Really? I wonder what they were trying to hide.
Yeah, my thoughts exactly. But wait, there's even more. It
There's
gets
always
better.
there's always more.
So the town hall, strangely enough, was temporarily occupied in 1875. However, the finishing of the ground floor rooms wasn't undertaken until 1878.
Huh? So they were working from the top down. That literally makes no sense, Casey.
I know, right? And the finishing of the second floor rooms was undertaken to coincide with the opening of the main hall, which opened with the second stage.
This whole project sounds like a schmozzle to me, or maybe just a big fat lie.
I know. It definitely doesn't add up, hey, especially when we're told that the corridors and the staircases of the second stage of the town hall were designed in a far less ornate manner. Throughout the corridors and the main hall, the hard white plaster was given a polished finish. Doors were added circa 1890 to the vestibule to separate it from the main hall. The rooms were subsequently repainted many times in simple one colour schemes.
So basically, they're admitting here that they couldn't replicate the quality and beauty of stage one. So they just had to do the best they could with stage two.
Yeah, pretty much. And I found
Jeez.
this really interesting too. So, this is taken from the City of Sydney archives. So, this is what it stated. The town hall was built in two sections, first the council offices and the vestibule, and later the centennial hall. The plans in this series, so this is, what they've got in a series in the archives. So the plans in this series relate to the construction of the centennial hall. The original designs for the council offices and the vestibule from February 1869 are not in council's custody. It was alleged by Edward Bell, the city engineer, that these plans had been taken by J.H. Wilson, the original designer of the hall, who was working as a consultant to council at the time. So that was taken from the special committee meeting minutes in 1867. It goes on to say there are some plans showing the details used to finish the rooms, the lobby, the entry, and the corridors of the ground floor of the town hall from 1878.
Hmm. Okay, so the Sydney Council have no plans of the 1860s stage one building and just a few from stage two in the 1870s. Odd, right?
Yeah, and then also from the archives, we basically have hearsay from Edward Bell saying that Mr. Wilson stole the plans. And if you want to read this fully, just pause and take a look. It's pretty interesting. But what's even more interesting is when you look at the list of men who worked on the apparent planning of this building, some oddities definitely jump out at you.
So, according to this, John Henry Wilson appeared to win the competition, then did something that caused him to be dismissed, and it appears that Bell and Bond had something to do with it. But in the meantime, Wilson dies, and we can't find any record on how he dies, only that he leaves a widow and multiple children that the council give a gratuity payment of 2 months' wages.
Okay, so let's take a look at the men responsible for the design of Sydney Town Hall. So we've got John Henry Wilson. He died before the building's completion in 1872, aged just 48 years. Then we have Edward Bell. So he died in 1875 at the age of 63. Then we have Albert Bond. So he resigned from the project in 1877 due to a conflict. He went on to keep living his life for a while longer, and he passed away in 1923. Thomas Sapsford, he was suspended, then dismissed, then he died as well in 1886, and he was only aged 39. Then we have John Hennessy. He went on to live his life and died in 1923. Lastly, we've got George McRae. So he's probably one of the more well-known architects on this list. It's noted that he became a Shmeeshmation in 1887, and he went on to live a life where he designed many buildings, including this beautiful, stunning building, the QVB, and this cute one, the municipal building on Hay Street, Sydney. Isn't that cute?
That is so cute.
Now,
Is that still there? Do we know?
Yeah, that's a modern
Oh,
day
there it is on the
right.
right
Yeah,
there. I
yeah.
see it.
Yeah.
Wow.
So this is a really interesting one for two reasons. So one, because they say that George used a style known as the Federation Anglo-Dutch, which you know why we think that that's interesting, with intricate detailing and textured facade. And the second thing that we find really interesting about this is because its main purpose was as a public toilet.
Pretty fancy toilet block, I say. I mean,
I
toilet block.
know it is, but sadly, McRae's story ends sadly too. So he unfortunately committed suicide in 1923.
Oh, very sad. But it's all kind of weird, huh? That all three men who survived the completion of the Sydney Town Hall and did go on to live their lives all then died in the same year of 1923. I mean, there is so much scandal, mystery, and confusion when it comes to this building, plus a lot of contradictions. It just doesn't make any sense.
So, do you think, JoJo, that Sydney Town Hall was found possibly in a semi damaged and mud flooded state after some sort of event, and that these men were actually employed to restore, renovate, and repurpose it? And the ones that wouldn't go along with the narrative they were told to follow were taken out in unfortunate early deaths.
And maybe when they're referring to stage one and stage two, stage one was the original part of the structure that was largely undamaged, and stage two was in a much more disturbed state. So, this is where these guys come in and had to renovate and try to replicate the architecture and the design of the old world, which is why stage two is described as being notably different and less grand.
Could it be that Sydney Town Hall and the other grand old buildings in the Sydney CBD and surrounds were already here? They were found, they were repaired and renovated the best that they could and repurposed as government buildings. And the so called built on a cemetery story is just a cover story in case any more bodies of the people who originally lived here and were lost in the last reset are accidentally dug up and discovered.
After knowing what we know and things that we've learnt so far about Australia's unbelievable history, it sounds totally plausible to me.
What about you guys out there watching? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Please leave them in the comments below.
And before we go, we're going to leave you with a couple more images of Sydney Town Hall.
Yeah, so this is a favorite one of mine, JoJo. So this is an apparent construction photo from 1875. Sorry, I've got to try not to laugh.
I know,
So
but please, this is a construction photo.
I know it's the cleanest construction site I've ever seen.
Wow.
There isn't, I can't even see anything. There's no scaffolding, there's no big piles of rubble. Because remember, they've had to excavate like a huge area underneath
Hmm.
the ground. I can't even see a workman in sight. All I can see is a dirt road, muddy, and nothing else.
Hmm.
It's it just makes me laugh. I'm
It
speechless.
does. It's crazy. Wow. And then, oh, here. Oh, yes, a modern day shot of the interior. Nice flooring.
Very nice
Mm.
indeed.
Hmm.
Okay, here we have the very majestic Sydney Town Hall Clock Tower. And this is just a little image that we found of two men cleaning the clock in the 60s, I think it was, 1960s.
Town Hall House. This
Oh,
atrocity was built in the 1970s. It was added to the rear of the Sydney Town Hall.
mm,
Ugh, ugh.
brutalism in all its ugly glory, huh?
Oh gosh, how did they think that was going to match the
Yeah,
original construction style?
it just, why would you do that? Like, it's like chalk and cheese.
It is. It is. Oh,
It's almost
awful.
like they're just taking the piss.
Mm-hmm. Jeez.
All right, what's this next one?
Okay, so this image taken in 1934, we can see that the main entrance is actually being remodeled with the demolition of the porte cochere, which was added in 1892. It was replaced with a flight of stairs. And then during World War II, the lower town hall was altered with additional columns to strengthen the structure.
Yeah, I find that interesting that, something like that took priority during a war when most of our men were away fighting. You
Mm-hmm.
start,
Most of the the male population were overseas. Like
yeah,
this
it's
was
all
such an important project to
great.
demolish that
Yeah,
porch type structure in the front there.
very odd. Yeah.
Okay, we're going to leave you now with this incredible panorama image taken in 1904. Thanks for watching and see you next time.
Bye, everyone.
Bye bye.